Hey guys, it's Amber from NotableInk.com. Welcome back to another Altenew release. This time we're releasing Paint-A-Flower Anemone, which is part of the Paint-A-Flower monthly subscription plan. Of course, you can get it separately, but with the subscription plan, you're guaranteed to get one of the sets at a discounted price. This set also includes 6 lovely sentiments. Inside the product insert is some design inspiration as well as suggested pairings. We're also releasing artist marker refills for sets D and E, and I've been waiting for Seashore and Tropical Forest for so long, so I'm super excited to play with those today. I have a piece of Yupo paper, and I've gold heat embossed the Anemone Paint-A-Flower stamp set on it, and now I'm dropping on Mountain Mist artist marker refill. So I'm just going to let that kind of move around, and I'm going to help it along with a synthetic paintbrush here. So you don't want to use one of your good paintbrushes when you're working with alcohol inks. Make sure you use an inexpensive, pretty much disposable one that you don't mind getting trashed, because the bristles will get hard and dried out. So don't use a good brush, guys. I've dropped in some rose quartz marker refill, and I'm just moving that around on the anemones and also the buds. I'm leaving the areas that are going to be green, so I'm trying to avoid those areas. And I do want some of the alcohol ink to bleed out into the rest of the panel outside of those embossed edges. So I've added another layer of the Mountain Mist, and I'm just going to move some of that around to get a little bit of shadow and variation in color going on. And then I'll start adding the bamboo marker refill. Now, I have no idea why I added so much of this. So it's going to look kind of like a hot mess for a little bit, and then I fix it in the end. But yeah, like I just keep adding it. Why? I don't know. It's like totally overboard. So I'm going to move that around with the brush, and then I'm also going to move it into, there's these little tiny leaves that come up around the bud. So I'm just going to take the brush to get it in those areas because those leaves are super small. And I'll just move this around and I'll let it dry a little bit. And you could, I mean, it's just like a big blob of green. Like, what is happening here? So now I'm going to start teasing the color outside of the embossed lines. I spritzed it with a touch of alcohol, and then I spray it more. Like, I have a problem with restraint, you guys. I can't seem to stop myself and just let things be. So fortunately, at this point, I leave it alone and just set it aside and move away from it. And I think that in the end, it turned out really pretty. So I went ahead and die cut it with a rounded rectangle die and popped it up on some fun foam and added a sentiment strip. And it was done. I didn't add any embellishment. So for the next card, we're going to see a little bit more of when I can't stop. I can't stop myself. So I added some Volcano Lake and I spritzed it with a little bit of alcohol. And now I'm adding some rose quartz. Now you'll see me kind of dry these colors in between. I don't want them to mix too much. I want them to stay a little bit separate, especially so that it doesn't turn into brown, especially when I start to add the tropical forest. So the seashore and the rose quartz that I have there, those are fine to mix because it'll just create a little bit of a purple. But the tropical forest has a yellow undertone. So when that mixes with the pink, it's going to create a brown. So I'm trying to keep those a little bit separate. So I'll put down a drop and then I'll add a little bit of alcohol from a pipette and start to get those moving. Now, this is kind of a different look to the panel than what I normally do. So normally when I do alcohol inks, I'll put my alcohol down first. And I'll put quite a bit of it down. I was feeling a little bit guilty about using alcohol at all, given the situation that we're in right now and it's not available. But this is alcohol that I've had in my craft room for a really long time. And I'm pretty sure that even if I tried to donate this to a hospital or a clinic or something like that needs it, they would not take a bottle that was used. So, but I was trying to conserve the alcohol, so I didn't create this panel like I normally would. Normally, I would create lighter, wispier backgrounds by using a lot more alcohol. So this ends up being super, super vibrant, and I love the way that it looks right now, but I'm struggling in my mind even as I'm creating this to determine what am I going to do with this and how am I going to tie this in to the Paint-A-Flower Anemone. One thing that you could do is do like an alcohol lift technique where you stamp it with the alcohol lift ink and it will kind of bleach out the alcohol that's underneath it. But I felt like this background was way too busy and this stamp set is super fine and delicate. The image would get completely lost in this panel. So I love the white space that's in this panel. I love the bright colors. But again, I'm just struggling to think about how I would use this and tie this into the panel. So ultimately, after I get this done and I spend this time in it, I decide to spray it with alcohol, the whole thing. So I spray it and I wait. And I wait just a little bit to see what's going to happen. And then I keep spraying it, you guys. Like I'll spray it and then I'll wait to see what happens. And I do this over and over. And it's going to start to get, it almost looks like a photoshopped image. Like when you take a photograph and you add a Photoshop filter to it. Like look how cool that looks. I don't know that I would be able to paint something that looks like that very well. So I set it aside so that it can complete drying. And then I moved on to stamping an entire panel with the Paint-A-Flower Anemone set. Here you can see I didn't leave enough room there. So I got really lazy. I did not want to cut out a mask for that. So I just stuck the closest Post-it note that I had. And I popped that on. And you can see I didn't plan that very well, right? I'm going to leave a little space there. So I decided to cut down the alcohol ink panel to cover that up. So I cut it with a rounded die, but I decided I would cover it with a coffee filter so that I wouldn't get some of the wet ink on my die. I didn't want to clean that off. So I got the second frame. I was going to use the center. I got the second frame and I thought, okay, well, I can use that on another card. But this coffee filter is stuck to my panel. So I have to try and get this off and not ruin the panel. So I grab my pokey tool and I'm trying to get this off. And then, so I tear this bit off. I know this is kind of painful to watch. I tear this off and then I'm like, well, that looks pretty cool. And that solves the issue of where the heck am I going to put this sentiment that it's going to stand out? So I left it there and I stamped my sentiment right over it. And I love it. Like, totally a mistake, not what I was expecting at all, but I probably would try and do that again. Now, I don't know if it would stick again. I don't know if this is a one-time thing and I'll never be able to recreate this, but I love how the crinkly paper looks with the sentiment on it, so it was perfect. If you try this, you'll have to let me know if it sticks, and I'm thinking we could probably just run just a little bit of glue like on your finger around the edge of it to get it to stick. So here I have that leftover frame and I'm just using some Post-it tape to mask off the corner. And I'm going to use the frame to figure out how I want to position the anemone stamp. So I have it inked up in Obsidian Pigment Ink as I did for the last card as well. I'll just pull up my Post-it tape and then I'll go ahead and stamp a sentiment from the set. So these sentiments are great. We have Live in the Moment and the last one was Be Your Own Kind of Beautiful. Here's the finished card. I opted not to add any embellishment to any of these cards. I felt like there was enough going on. And when I put sequins and drops down, they just seem to take away from the design rather than enhance it. Here are the finished cards, and I hope that you guys enjoyed seeing the process of how these cards came together and evolved. It's a great example of real life in my craft room. I just really sit down and start creating and playing with the products and see what happens. The vast majority of the time things turn out really well, even if it's not as I initially intended. So I'll have all the details for the hop down below. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you real soon with more inspiration.